Welcome to the Andrew D'Angelo podcast.
Constant Constance. Each week, Andrew, renowned jazz saxophonist and brain cancer survivor, invites us to look at the many worlds of his guests, with conversations that cover all the arts, human resilience, a little bit of politics, and a lot of humour.
You can't fail to have a fantastic time.
Hey everybody, welcome. We are here today with yet another longtime friend of mine, Ted Reichman. He is a composer. He writes film scores. He is also professor at New England Conservatory in the Contemporary Improvisation Department, the CI department as he calls it. He also taught at Berklee School of Music, College of Music. I guess they've changed it since I went there. Up in Boston. Ted, man, welcome. Thank you for being on the show. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Andrew.
Yeah. And you know, it's funny because I'm realizing after doing a bunch of these shows that my memory is just so foggy sometimes. We met in Boston, right? Back in the day, like.
Well, actually, I think we did, but I'm a little younger than you. And
No, you're not.
I was an annoying 14-year-old customer at the Tower Records Jazz Department, which I think is how we actually first met.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when I was managing the Boston Tower Records, you came in to whatever shop, and that's how we met.
I think it's possible. Now, okay. I don't know if this is 100% true.
Okay.
But I think it's possible that you sold me my first John Coltrane and Charles Mingus.
I'll take it. Let's make that the story, man.
Yeah.
So Ted, I'm really excited that you offered to bring your two students, Adrian and Cate, on the show, who are going to come in about halfway through. Can you just quickly tell us a little bit about what's going on in the Contemporary Improvisation Department at New England Conservatory?
Yeah. Well, okay. So the Contemporary, well, I'll call it the CI department because it's too many syllables.
Right. It is a long one.
Yeah. The CI department, it originally was known as the third stream department, and it was sort of a creation of Gunther Schuller and Rand Blake. It was kind of built around Rand Blake. And I should know the exact date. I think it was around 50 years ago that it got started, early 70s. And the idea behind third stream and CI is sort of like an ear-based conservatory curriculum where students learn things by ear and really develop their ears and their sort of voices as improvisers, as musicians in general, through listening and through their ears, through ear training. And so that has sort of evolved over time to mean, it's not jazz, it's not classical. So it becomes kind of a mixture of almost anything could be considered contemporary improvisation.
Right.
At this point, we have people, and I mean that in a positive sense. That's not a critique. I mean, we have people in the department who are working on West African music. We have people working on a lot of kind of song-oriented stuff and bluegrass. There's been a very rich thread of bluegrass and Americana music in the last 10, 12 years, especially since Sarah Jarosz, who's a really super successful artist in that genre, she did her undergraduate in our department while she was already assigned super successful artist.
Wow.
So,
cool.
Yeah, so there's a lot of that, and of course there's a lot of free improvisation. Joe Morris and Anthony Coleman and I kind of are the people. Well, there's other people as well. I mean, we're certainly not the only people who do that, but we kind of do a lot of more open form music, free improvisation. So it's a lot of stuff. In the last few years, I've kind of become one of the more technology oriented people in the department, working on people on electronic music, electronic composition, studio technique. I also teach a class on studio technique and recording. It's in general.
Can I interrupt you there for a second? Because first of all, I know Anthony Coleman plays piano, organ. That's kind of his vibe, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think he's
okay.
Also,
and then
composer would be the first word.
Okay, composer.
Yeah.
And then Joe Morris, he's the guitarist, right? Or does he play bass?
He plays guitar and bass.
One thing that keeps coming up in my life is how the recording studio, whether it's at home and you're using your DAW or you're having a recording engineer at a quote unquote official studio, is kind of becoming a part of the band, of the process, maybe even more so than, 50 years ago, it's kind of an element. Would you agree with that, or is that just totally nuts?
Well, absolutely. And I think, one thing that, I think musicians outside of quote unquote the pop world,
right,
sort of have ignored a little bit is the extent to which, really for a long time now, for I don't know, 30 years or more, there's this huge area of music that is made in home studios, or very elaborate home studios. And that's not a demo or a sketch. Like people, since the hip hop era and especially, all the electronic music that has emerged in the last 30 years, the person making music in their home studio is not like necessarily, someone just sketching out random ideas. Like they're making the final product. Like the work, like the actual artwork is the thing made in the computer, So I think, I've really tried to, make that be real for myself and for all the musicians who I work with, not just students, that, working on your own in the studio is as important a way of working as any other method, and the sort of, I feel like for a long time in the kind of that's a terrible term I was about to use. I was about to say a term that I despise, which is post jazz. It's terrible.
Well, yeah, you're treading in dangerous waters.
Yeah, I don't want to use that word because I don't believe that at all. But I would say, when we're educated through what we've thought of as the typical conservatory, or whatever institution, jazz education, there's this kind of leader side person methodology where you write your music, and however you write it, you form a band with side people and you rehearse it and you execute it, and maybe you play gigs, you go into the studio, whatever. And that's a completely legitimate way of working that I've done a lot, mostly as a side person. But I've really tried to emphasize the idea that a person can create legitimate music on their computer, and a lot of music we love was made that way, and it doesn't mean that it's illegitimate, So
right, and also it seems that from the very passive surveys that I've done with people who are teaching at university level, there's quite a few of their students that don't even read notation. I mean, they don't read music. Everything is done either in the box and maybe sometimes out of the box with some, hardware. Yeah. But has that been your experience, that a lot of your students don't read or write, music in a traditional way?
Well, yes and no, because that's, as I was saying about the CI department, we really emphasize working by ear. And so, using scores is something that we kind of de-emphasize in our department. I mean, obviously, but then when I also teach in the jazz department, and in the jazz department, people compose on paper all the time.
Right.
So there are people in the CI department who, I should maybe back up a little bit. I mean, I think in general, in my work in the CI department, I approach scores as something not exactly optional, but something to be kind of, dealt with in, it's good or desire to deal with it in kind of non-traditional ways. So we do a lot of graphic scores, which is, we do a lot of graphic scores. Right. I personally do a lot of text scores. In fact, that's something I've been working on a lot. And I just released sort of a Bandcamp compilation of people playing my text scores. So open form compositions that aren't traditionally notated is something that I think gets a lot of attention in the department. But I think most of our students, it is a conservatory and we try to do it on a serious way. I think the bulk of our students can read music, right. And the bulk of our students are doing lots and lots of different things. Most of them are playing in, they could be studying with a super advanced classical instructor, because that's one of the great things about, doing what we do at NEC is that our students, can study with the absolute top, string teachers, or instrumental teachers from jazz or classical sides or CI. I mean, there's no limits to who they could study with. So they tend to be very advanced musicians, even if they're doing something, kind of, outside of the jazz classical kind of framework, so they have chops, is what I'm saying.
Right. I mean, you're getting a little idiomatic. And I guess one of the things I want to do with this show is bring people into our world.
Right.
And not alienate people.
Sure.
And that's one of the aspects of your students' music that I was so enthralled by, is like, man, can I call them kids? Is that bad these days? All right. These students are making some really welcoming music, and I really appreciated that. I didn't feel like I'm not going to generalize. For the most part, what I heard, they weren't attempting to push people away. They were making a statement, but it was like, yeah, come on in and enjoy this music. And I guess what I was curious about, I have two questions.
Yeah.
One is, when you're doing your film scores, and I know you have a project that's getting some attention now, a film that's in film festivals, and I want to talk about that. But also, what about you? Are you still notating? Are you still using printed scores and handing them out? Or what's your process?
Good question. I mean, I have several modes that I'm working in now. And the one that involves the most writing stuff down is the film scoring, when I'm hiring people to come in and play. If I'm just working on a lot of my film scoring. So I have sort of three main areas that I'm working in right now, which is film scoring and then electronic music. That's kind of whatever it is, especially electroacoustic music. And then I also have been writing these open form compositions, which are text scores, meaning they're just like verbal instructions. And so for the past few years, that's mostly what I've been doing. And so, I tend to do a lot of improvisation. I mean, all three of these things involve a balance between kind of thought out ideas and improvisation and recording and notation. I mean, they're all kind of in the mix. I've also been working very hard. For the last 3 years, I've gotten, this kind of is a hard thing for me to talk about, but I've been kind of writing a lot of poetry, and I've been writing a lot in general, poetry and essays for the most part. And I realized at a certain point that I'm especially interested in this kind of idea of words and music kind of generating each other, sort of opposite sides. So most of the notation I've done lately has been in the form of text, either in the form of kind of semi-improvising music based on texts, or then also creating texts that emerge out of a semi-improvised musical practice. So like I'm working right now on a really kind of elaborate, relatively long, 35-minute long piece that's like electronic improvisations, sort of semi-improvisations. I mean, none of it's like totally improvised, that I kind of wove together into a 35-minute long piece. And then I wrote a series of poems with that. And then I'm now recording myself reading the poems on top of the music. And I can't even decide if it's good or not. Like, it's so out on a limb for me. It's like I'm very insecure about it because it's so different from anything that I've done. But before this, I was doing these pieces where I would write these kind of quasi-poetic texts that would generate music. And now I've kind of done the opposite, where I wrote this music that then generated the text.
Well, I mean, there's a constant conversation, which, the chicken or the egg, which comes first, right? and so, whether you're writing text and then the music comes from that, or vice versa. I mean, philosophically, I love hearing what people, my guests, what their thoughts on are, where does music come from in the first place? I mean, anywhere I've gotten from God to source energy to it's all completely intellectual. There is, it's just, and, I've been asked that myself as well. Where does your music come from? It's like, I don't know. I really don't. And, they may even ask me about a specific piece, and I'm like, I don't know. I just woke up one day and I wrote it down. I heard it. Right. So for you, first of all, what's the name of the film that you're currently that's showing? And when you're in that process where you're under a deadline, okay? So I know you told me during the break that it took you about a year to score the film. When somebody says, you have until, March 3rd to finish this scene. I mean, do you just try to crank it out? I mean, what's going on? That was a lot of questions there.
That's a good question. Okay, so I mean, just to back up a little bit. So yeah, the film, to answer the first question, the film is called Missing in Brooks County.
Okay.
And if you want to see where it's playing, they have a website, missinginbrookscounty.com. It played in the Human Rights Watch Film Festival, I guess about a week or two ago.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's playing in online festivals. I mean, it's been playing in festivals for a few months now, so we're kind of, I think that's probably slowing down at this point, but it's also going to be on PBS at some point in the near future. The film is about the southern border, Texas and Mexico border, and people who cross the border and die, and it's about several different people who are involved in either preventing those deaths or helping relatives of the dead find their bodies in the desert. So it's not a happy film. Yeah, it was very intense. But so to answer the question on the more practical level, I actually worked on the film for a lot more than 1 year because, and this is not uncommon for like how I work on certain documentaries. So like I should also say that the people who made this documentary are very, very close friends and collaborators of mine, like people who I've been working with for a long time. And so when they ask me to do a film, it's not just like hire me to write 40 minutes of music or whatever. It's like I'm kind of with them on a slightly deeper level because we're close friends and because I really believe in their work. Okay. And so, I started out the film, like they just, before they'd even gotten to, usually when you make music for a film, you're working in the towards the tail end of post-production. So after the film has been edited or maybe during the editing process, but I actually did music for this film way earlier than that, or like even before they started editing, while they were still shooting, they sent me a bunch of still images just from, that they shot on location.
Sort of as inspiration kind of thing, or?
Yeah. Because they want music. And this is kind of common, I think. Filmmakers want music during the editing process. And a lot of times they'll use music just from their CD collection, or like, a lot of times, for temp, they'll use temp music. So they'll use music from other scores. And if they're working with a composer, like these guys, hopefully, knock on wood, they'll always work with me. maybe they'll fire me someday, but they, they have a lot of music that I've written for them. So they would use my music as temp music. But for this time, I don't remember whose idea this was. It might've been my idea. I'm not sure. I just made a bunch of music for them. They sent me a bunch of like adjectives. I said, again, words generating music. Right. I asked them to send me a bunch of adjectives just for the different kind of, feelings or ideas that they wanted in the film in general, just in the music, which I then did.
Can I interject something here, Ted? Yeah. I don't know if you know this, but I got a film in the Norwegian Film Festival maybe 15, 20 years ago, something like this.
You got as a composer or as a filmmaker?
I made the film.
Oh, cool.
I did the music.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I didn't win. I think I came in second or something like this, or third. But the interesting part was to bump up my fee, they got me a master class at a film school in Norway. And I had taken a bunch of footage when we were protesting George Bush, the younger Bush, yeah. George W. Bush, who seems like a saint at this point, for God's sakes. But and so I ran this clip. It was maybe 3 minutes, and I just played different music to the clip over and over. Yeah. Maybe some happy music, some of my more avant-garde stuff, maybe some string stuff. And the kids who were in their 18 to 22, something like this, were like, whoa. Like one time it seemed like a lighthearted comedy. One time it seemed like a death march. One time it seemed like these people were going to kill, like storm the Capitol. And I was like, music is very important to film.
Yeah, for sure.
And it really, what you're doing, Ted, when you're scoring these films, I mean, you really can create a different mood, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, and that's part of the conversation that you're having with the filmmakers. I mean, I think, filmmakers can't always articulate exactly what they want from music, but they know the film that they're trying to make, like they understand the, and I also think that in documentaries, especially in documentaries, I was talking with someone about this the other day, documentaries have messages, they're sort of they're not abstract. They have some sort of rhetorical argument that they're trying to get across.
Right.
And I think the music in general is meant to help them accomplish that goal. And I think, my understanding of this film in particular was that it was very much about empathy, with the people in this film. And so a lot of what I was trying to do was, even in sort of these very, kind of like disturbing, sad images, to bring out that kind of feeling of empathy, of humanity.
I had this pop singer on last week from Australia. Her name's Shelley Harland, and she was sharing some of her music with me. And she has a couple of young children. I said, "What is it like to write such sexy music and have, 2 young children?" Right? Yeah. And she goes, "Oh, wait." So she sent me the videos that go to the music.
Yeah.
And it was the Portland protests, Minneapolis, all these protests. And the same thing, it was empathy music.
Yeah.
But it was lost on me without the imagery.
Yeah.
And then when I saw the videos, I was like, oh, this is really caring music. And it's sharing love with these people who are protesting Black Lives Matter, or Breonna Taylor's death. And I don't really think I felt stupid. I just didn't understand what her and plus with the accent, I didn't fully understand the lyrics, on first listen. But it's amazing to me how much imagery and sound can impact somebody's experience. Like there's that classic Jaws theme, right? That we like, anytime we hear that shit, we're like, all right, we're in Jaws, right?
Yeah.
So I guess you've done, I haven't seen all of your work. You've done a lot of documentaries. That's pretty much your thing, right?
Early on, I did some non-documentary films. I would love to do more of those. I somehow, I think exclusively done documentaries for a while now. And it's not because I have a specific love for documentaries. I think it's just because that's sort of who I know in the industry. And
right.
And I think I also, my musical voice, one thing I was going to say in relationship to the comment about empathy before is that, a lot of times in these films, the music needs to be quite minimal. So I think one thing, my musical skills are very limited in a lot of ways, but one thing that I can do is get an emotional message across without doing very much, So I figured out a way to kind of like convey these emotions through music without needing an entire orchestra to like play a gigantic theme. So I think that's what a lot of the filmmakers I work with want, where they're kind of like, again, trying to accomplish some kind of a rhetorical goal. They're trying to communicate something, and they don't want the music to like bang it over the head, but they do want the music to help that. So a lot of times my goal is, my job in this stuff is to do something that's really almost not there, but that is, helping accomplish that rhetorical mission.
First of all, everybody, this film that Ted is talking about involves a lot of dead bodies, and I can only imagine them sending you a photo from a film shoot. And I'm assuming they're reenactments, but I don't know.
No, they're not.
Right. So they're sending you a photo of like 3 dead bodies or whatever they're doing. And they're like, okay, write some music to that. That's not easy to do, right?
No. And as I was saying before about like the time scale of the thing, I started it by creating these sketches, and then I was still, I kind of was away from it for a long time. And then I was back to it for like over a year, and we're going back and forth. You were asking about the process.
Yeah.
There's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of like adjusting things and redoing things sometimes. And, so I'd be looking at some of these very violent, violent's not the right word, but, kind of gory scenes, right. Not reenactments, like actual dead bodies. And it took me to a pretty dark place,
Yeah. What's weird? Did you watch the impeachment trials, any of it?
A few minutes of it, not that much.
Did you notice that when in Donald Trump's defense, they were playing video?
Yeah.
And there was a soundtrack.
Yeah, it was absurd.
I'm like, why are they playing a fucking soundtrack at a presidential impeachment hearing?
Yeah, it's absurd.
Huh?
It's totally absurd. And then also like on a cinematic level, the Democrats' videos, it really was like a film lesson, it was like a lesson in cinema technique, because like the Democrat side, they edited back and forth between what was happening outside the Capitol and inside the Capitol. And there was no I mean, there was editing and there was like intertitles where they had words, very minimal, but there was no music. It was very from the cinema verite tradition. Cinema verite is a documentary tradition where they just sort of film what's going on and then edit it. And it's not to say that there's no, messing with things, because editing is itself an expressive tool. But when the Republicans were doing their thing with the music, and I didn't watch that much of it, but it was like that's sort of the difference between like the cinema verite school and this kind of other technique of documentary where it's more like propaganda, where you're sort of using. I mean, not the cinema verite can't be propaganda, but they're using the music to really underline. I
was like, wait! They didn't play the Star Wars theme, right? But I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
And I had to tie myself to that because I had the New York press secretary on my show. So I really wanted to pay attention to the hearings as much as I could so I could talk to him about it.
Yeah.
But that, like, being in that moment and watching that happen real time with the music and then just kind of looping, this, all right, somebody's coming in. Ladies and gentlemen, will.
Can I just finish one thought before we do that? Sorry, I want to say one thing about the documentaries for 1 second. I'm sorry to mess up your flow, Andrew.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will be right back with Mr. Ted Reichman and two of his students. And Ted, do you have any final words you'd like to say before we take our break?
Well, I just wanted to say, ironically, like from the documentary filmmaking music perspective, actually my favorite documentary films of all time tend to not have music or to have very little music. Like for example, Les Blanc is one of my favorite documentary filmmakers, and he makes a lot of films about musicians. And so there's a lot of music in his films, but they're not scored, and yet those films have like such a clear cinematic vision, and they like communicate what they're talking about so powerfully. And so I think like there's a certain school of documentary filmmaking that just doesn't even use music, which I think is like a very powerful cinematic gesture. And so even sometimes when I'm doing film music for a documentary, I'm kind of trying to, keep that tradition of filmmaking in mind at the same time.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Ted. All right. We'll be right back with Adrian and Cate. Hello, everyone. We are back with Ted Reichman, professor of contemporary improvisation at New England Conservatory in Boston. And we were with two of his students here, Cate Byrne and Adrian Chabla. Oh shit, did I say it right? Okay. And I would like to I would like to tell everybody why I instigated this conversation. A student of mine, and that's not fair. It was a one-off. I did a master class in Europe. And then I kind of befriended this student of mine, and he sent me his record maybe 2 weeks ago. Ted, is that about right when you posted this stuff?
Something like that, yeah.
Okay. And he's like, will you let me know what you think? And I hated it. It took me like 3 days to get through a 53-minute record or something like this. And nobody knows who this person is, so that's fine. And then Ted posted your tracks along with your fellow student friends. And I was like, what? Like, nobody's making music like this. Like, right, Ted? Didn't I like get at you like, huh?
Yes, you responded immediately, yes.
I was just like, wait, what? Like, who's making music like this? Where is this music coming from? And it's, by the way, both of you, absolutely brilliant. Ted can tell you, I have written a lot of music in my life. I have written scores notated that are 50, 75 pages long. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. Who's writing this music? Like, what are they doing? Where does this come from? Where does the energy come from? And the compositional sense. I mean, there's these intros, especially on yours, Cate, and these outros and these builds. I would say, Adrian, yours is more static. There's nothing wrong with that. But I'm like, are you, either of you, aware of these things? Are you just kind of spitballing it? Is Ted guiding you along? Feel free, either one of you, to answer any of that. I'm just so impressed, and I wanted the world to know who you were, and I really love that music. And I told Ted I listened to it, I don't know, each of your tracks at least 10 times, and a couple of times very stoned. And they're really, 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 really wonderful. Thank you so much for your music.
That's incredible that you said that, Andrea. Before they answer, can I say a couple of words?
Yeah, you're gonna fucking interrupt the whole time.
I am.
Go ahead, Ted.
Just to briefly frame, I'm notorious for this. Just to briefly frame.
Shut up, Ted.
Just to briefly frame. This is also a result of us working in the remote era. I was tasked with the idea of doing a CI ensemble over Zoom. And so all of the pieces that you heard were the result of Zoom collaboration and overdubbing. So we can talk about what I do in non-Zoom CI ensembles maybe after this conversation.
Maybe the sage will get rid of Ted. Hold on.
Okay, I'm going to stop talking. Sage is burning. I stopped talking.
Oh, wait. Let me do that too.
See? Remove the Reichman. Remove the Reichman.
I'm out of sage right now, so I can't.
While Adrian lights the sage, Cate, why don't you talk a little bit about your piece and or even Ted, if you have it. Ted has them both queued up. So if we want to listen at some point and talk about them more specifically, I'd love that. But if you don't want to, that's fine too.
Yeah, sure. This was actually really fun for me because it was the first time I wrote a piece of music like this. Having everybody in the ensemble contribute was really fun because everybody had a different idea that they would record and send along to me. And then I got the chance to listen to all of them and cut up parts, move them all around. And I've never done that before. So that was super fun and a new way of writing music for me. And I had a lot of fun with it.
It's interesting. Before you both came on, one of the things Ted and I talked about, and something that keeps coming up on my shows, but just in life, is that I'm going to say the recording studio, but that makes me sound old, and I am old. But the production, the post-production has become part of the band, in my opinion. And Ted agreed with me. And there are a lot of people in Ted, what do we decide? Like our generation or jazz people or something that are resisting this, that it's not just you get a band together, you go do a gig, you go back home, Now there's like, hey, you have post-production. And that's one thing I was going to ask you both, especially you, Adrian, how much, editing and post-production went into your piece there, which, what's it called again? I never learned how to pray. Your audio is off, Adrian, or something.
Can you hear me now? No?
Yes.
Nothing?
Yep.
Yeah. The editing process is definitely like that should take forever, honestly. Like I probably spent like, I don't know, at least like 20, 30 hours, like minimum on that. Because
that's nothing, man.
Yeah, it's not too bad. But like, it's just like, I just feel like what you said about the post-production thing, honestly, I feel like the way that I grew up listening to music was like so influenced by the production and like what it sounded like that like, I don't even really remember like, I mean, like I understood that like, and I was surrounded by people that were kind of like what you were saying, like maybe like in a more of like a jazz tradition or like a more like just like a tradition of like going gigs and like playing music. And like I played some stuff like that, but like the type of music that I always liked was like taking production as like a part of the art. Like the fact that it's recorded music is like acknowledging that fact and then using like all of the abilities that we have to like create like different sounds and exploring like the concept of a piece of music as a recorded idea is like just so it becomes so important to me about like my artistry and what like you can do, like what you can make, like and what you have the ability to make like from your like literal home. Like I did everything that I needed to do like at my house. Like I like finished mixing it when I like did mixing when I was like in a car on the way home, like to like, back to my like family's house. Like that's like you can do it literally anywhere. It's available like to everyone. So like I think like that is a much like more equitable and like I guess like more like desirable space to be in for music, I feel like as a whole, because now like we can give like the ability to create like art and music and full like fledged ideas to anyone. And I think like music has become like, because of the way that the like society that we're in works, like it can become very classist and very like, I do this because like I get to study it, like I have the ability to, I have like the resources and the time and the energy and like the money to study these things. And now like that's just becoming like less and less and less true. And I think like that's really important, and like important to like the detachment of the idea that music is not like, you know, not a classist thing, but is just like an expression of self, that like everyone's like music is just as beautiful as anyone else's. Like there's no good, bad, like better, worse. You know what I mean? And I think that's why production is like so important and like such an important part about like the way music is going to develop in the next few years.
Bravo. And I one of the things that also Ted and I touched on was, I mean, Ted, I think you can relate in the jazz world, they're holding on to it. They're doing these live streams and it's basically an empty club with them playing jazz standards. And it's like, okay, that kind of worked when we all could smoke inside and you're having some beers or whatever you do in there. And, you know, you're touching people and you're having fun, maybe whatever. But it's just so ridiculous to me. It's kind of like the emperor's new clothes for me.
Yeah, if I could say something about that, I mean, I think
you don't have to ask permission, Ted.
Well, one of the things you hear in this ensemble's recordings, like it's interesting because at the same time that I was doing this, I was also trying to do this with jazz ensembles, because I coach jazz ensembles and what we call CI ensembles, and I have really struggled with the idea of doing jazz, something that really is jazz, like in the computer. Like I just am not convinced that it's even possible, you know, but I am tasked with that by the school and it's my job. So I'm trying very hard to make it work.
Right.
But whereas with this ensemble, because we're not coming into it with sort of like a preset method or model for what it's supposed to be, and I can make it whatever I want. You know, that was a little bit more amenable to a kind of non-real time, you know, working method. And I think, you know, because there wasn't sort of like, you know, not that I feel jazz has to sound a certain way. I think jazz, you know, when it doesn't have that kind of spark of interaction and improvisation, like it's kind of like, what's the point? You know, it's like, you know, I don't really care. I don't have a preset model of what jazz sounds like, but I do kind of have a preset model of like how jazz should feel, or like what should go into the making of jazz. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Old fashioned in that way. But because this group, you know, the group that Adrian and Cate were in doesn't have that kind of preset notion. And honestly, when I'm doing a CI ensemble, not during a global pandemic, I also go into it with sort of no preset idea of like what it's supposed to sound like. And I'm often dealing with like really, you know, kind of unusual instrumentations and mixes of people with very, very different skill sets. And so like, there's always this kind of surprise factor of what it's going to be like. But I did not expect this particular ensemble to work so well on Zoom. So fucking good. And I hope nobody's offended by cussing. And also
ask, like, can we do that on the show? Like,
yeah, you can cuss. And also I just use the word man because I'm from the 1900s. So you're just gonna have to deal with that. I just say, hey man, you know what I mean? That's just who I am. And my ex-boyfriend
the other day,
my ex-boyfriend was on the show and he said I was acting too straight. So I just want you to know that, you know, everybody's up my ass about that, but I don't know what to do. I am who I am. But I guess one of my back and forth with Ted after listening like first time to both of your songs and also everything else up there was how much of this is, I'm going to use this lame word, organic. It just happened that way. And I mean, Adrian, you kind of talked about that. You did a lot of post-production. And by the way, 20 to 30 hours is nothing. And I'm not offending you, but I worked on a record for 10 years. Okay. There is all kinds of stuff that you could go on forever. At a certain point, it's like, all right, that's enough editing and mixing. I'm done. And then there's doing this thing where you go and you try to perfect the shit. Right. But especially with yours, Cate, I wondered, especially I assume you're playing the improvised violin, like about halfway through.
There's two violins, I believe. The one that has more of a solo is actually another member of the.
Oh, the one who plays the Johnny Carson theme. Am I going to get in trouble for that, Ted?
No. They may not even know that they play the Johnny Carson theme.
Right. I
know that.
I was wondering if somebody Cate, in other words, whoever was playing that violin part, which sounded if you want, Ted could play that part and we can talk about it, but if you probably know it enough. And either way, I will put the link so people can hear your music if they want to. Is somebody playing over, we'd say over the top of already finished stuff, or did somebody play that and you cut and pasted and edited, and how did that go for you?
Yeah, so when I originally sent out the music, there's kind of the chopping background violin.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, is that a violin, mandolin, guitar? What is that?
Yeah, so that was my electric violin, and I sent that out, and then the other violinist, Clay, took that and improvised over it, and then I took that and I rearranged it a little bit to try to fit better within the context of the song. And
hold on. What do you mean rearranged it? Tell us what that means.
Sure. So I took some of his parts, and sometimes I would cut out certain sections. And there was a few times when I took something he played and moved it to try to line up better with, like, for example, Adrian's vocals. So there was definitely a lot of it was organic, and I would keep some of it in the same exact place where Clay did play, but other times I just really moved stuff around to try to experiment and see what things could sound like in different, what little snippets of sound and melodies could sound like in different places.
Brilliant, because I think you have to understand a bit of the demographic that will be watching this show, or that does watch this show, are people of Ted and mine. Although Ted very vehemently told me he was younger than me earlier, so fuck you, Ted. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, but what, a year? Come on. But anyway, and so when we say rearranged, we mean we went and rewrote the parts. We don't mean we went into our DAW and played around and copy and pasted. Correct, Ted? Would you agree with that statement, or do you want to correct me?
No, that's correct. I mean, I would say, just as there was not a preset method of how these pieces were made. Like, for example, one of the other pieces in the playlist by Richard Skolmanis was a written out score, kind of an open form score, but he brought in a chart, with actual traditional notation on it, which we, overdubbed in kind of some semi unconventional way.
Right.
But I didn't prescribe some method for the ensemble. I just I think a lot of people sort of followed my lead, because I brought in a track. Basically, I just brought in a track and said, here's a track in a Google Drive, download this, play on it for 45 minutes, upload what you did, and then I'll put it in my computer and make a piece out of it. And that's how this started, just sort of me, modeling a particular, approach. But they couldn't hear, they only hear that original track. They would hear whatever the first track was. They can't hear each other's parts. So it kind of becomes the composer's job to kind of, carve an arrangement out of that in retrospect. So it's almost like, I kind of think of it as almost like a Tio Macero kind of concept, like how Tio Macero would take the sessions, the tracks from a Miles Davis session, and kind of, through editing and mixing, form them into the albums that we know, so that was always my kind of touchstone for this idea.
It worked really well, and I have an agenda, because there are some things I love when that violin, I guess now I learned, kind of time thing comes in. I think it was about 2 minutes and 3 seconds, something like this. I tried to memorize the moment, and then the time, you flip the time. I don't know if you know that, but you basically have a 7/8 bar or something like this, and then the time turns around, right? And then it stays that way. I love that moment. And Adrian, I caught a conversation on the Facebook where Ted was talking about you overwriting with one of his colleagues, right? Maybe one of your
about with Jim Pugliese.
Yeah. Do not listen to them. They probably said the same thing to Mozart, man. Don't write so much.
Oh, I know. This has been the fact. It's chill.
That is the last fucking thing I was thinking about when I'm listening to your song. I'm not like, Adrian sounds like they're overwriting. You know what I mean? I was like, this is just amazing. both of you. I'm not trying to pick one or the other, but that I caught that thread and I actually copy and pasted it because you're like, what are you guys talking about me for?
Say that was you said we were putting you on blast. That was
And the thing that was crazy was like, okay, like you didn't even tag me. It wasn't like, oh, like this, like we're talking about
called
this,
out, Ted.
Like, oh, like on the low, like if you find this, like this is what I'm saying. Like,
okay.
Come on.
It was like what I wanted to say though earlier about like the way that we were recording. It was really interesting because I had like worked with people like online before, like sending tracks back and forth, and it was like fine. Like it was really boring, honestly.
Right.
But like with this ensemble, like what I thought was so interesting, I guess like it's kind of like the idea that you were talking about, Ted, like with like the way that the producer for those Miles Davis albums like constructed like albums out of the source material, I guess. Like it was so weird because in the beginning I was so unaware of how I was gonna do it and like how I was gonna like put myself into people's pieces, and then I started to understand that like, because I like when I, like you said, like I kind of do overwrite, or like I think a lot about, like I try to like populate sections as much as possible in my music, and then like with this I realized like I could just leave so much space and I could be as like vague as I wanted to, and I also could be like as like detailed as I wanted to. Like I could add like a whole bunch of ideas because I knew that like if someone didn't like them they could just take it out. And I thought that was really interesting. Like I had never really felt like that before, like where I was just like, I'm just gonna give you a whole bunch of shit that I have and like you can like take it or leave it. Like I really don't care. And like I thought that was cool because like you just like, because everyone, like you too, Cate, like I just thought like one, like you said earlier, Andrew, the intro of your piece is like absolutely gorgeous. And like you just like, you could just like, you know, everyone in the ensemble would just like take these pieces that like, and I would never know like what would be like until like I was like super excited to hear this mixtape because I never heard any of the final mixes. Like I didn't know what anything sounded like until it came out, and then I was like, oh, like,
wow,
I sound like that on that. Like that's crazy. Like I didn't know do that. So I thought it was really cool. It's a really fun way to work.
Yeah, one of the other things so I have two things I was going to say. One of them is that, Andrew, I'm sure you've had this experience of like if you go in and play on a pop session or something, like where you're working with the pop producer and like they've got a track that's in some sort of semi-unfinished state, and they just say like, do something on this track and we'll do something with it. I mean, I don't know how much of that kind of work in studios you did, but I did a lot of that, where like I would go in with the accordion or synthesizers or whatever instrument, and they would say like, well, we don't have a part for you, but we've got this idea and we want you to do something. I think that's a very typical, studio experience for a lot of musicians, where it was anyway back in the days when we did sessions like that. Now I think it tends to happen more like this online. But the other thing I was going to say was, one of the real problems of doing ensembles online has been like when you're doing an ensemble rehearsal in normal real life, everybody enters the physical space for an hour or 2 hours or whatever, and you do your work in that space, and maybe somebody does a little bit of practicing or preparation outside of that space. But like that 2 hours is the time when we're working on the music, and it gives it a certain urgency and a certain intensity in how you do things. And so one of the things I really wanted to do with these ensembles is like, we meet for 2 hours and we work on this music for those 2 hours. Like it's not homework. I mean, if you want to do stuff to prepare or bring in an idea or whatever, like that's voluntary. Another thing is I'm trying to maintain a certain atmosphere of everything's voluntary. There's no requirements. Like, especially during the pandemic, I really wanted it to be like a fun experience and not like an anxiety inducing experience, like just a creative laboratory where we're going to come together for 2 hours. We're going to try to do something. If it happens in the 2 hours, it's great. If it doesn't, go on with the rest of your life. You know what I'm saying? But so I really try to get people like, here's the idea, turn off Zoom for 45 minutes, play on it, come back, we'll listen to it together, and we'll just do something with it.
It goes back to, Adrian, I think you said this, but maybe you'll both be interested about this whole classist thing, because I was in Ted, I was in Andy Taub's studio on Friday, and that's $1,500 a day, not including getting there, getting home, if you buy some food for whoever's there, little stuff. I bought a couple of bottles of wine, and that's limiting for some people, but you also have this sense that I got to get it done in this time that I'm here.
Yep.
And it's not like I'll just work it out after the fact because I'm in here renting this $1 million studio and blah, blah, blah. And I'm using the owner's time and the assistant and the engineer. And so it's just a very different way of working, something that I'll admit it took me, Ted's the reason I'm out of it, because Ted started these Sunday night chats where he was like, all right, guys, we got to figure this shit out and we got to figure out now. Right, Ted?
I guess, yeah.
I like that. I like that we were one of those Zooms. You sent us an email and you said, everybody put your Zoom settings like, blah, blah, HD, blah, 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 and stereo, blah, blah. And then we spent 20 minutes totally fucked up. There was like audio, like loops and feedback and like some shit wasn't working.
Classic. That's just how it's been. Well, that was early pandemic though. That was like in the spring. So,
Okay.
People's Zoom chops have improved a lot since then.
Right. So I wanted to ask you both, is there anything you wanted to tell us that we haven't already talked about, either these particular songs that people are going to hear or your process or, anything about your music?
Hey, you want to go first? Mine's
All right.
short. Mine's like nothing.
Cool. I'll keep mine pretty short too then. One thing I feel really inspired by the work we did in the ensemble last semester, and I definitely took a lot away from just learning how to work remotely in new creative ways. And one thing that I'm especially inspired about is I also took Ted's recording class last semester, so I'm just really inspired by just learning how to use DAWs better. And I play electric violin, which is how I did the kind of ambient stuff in the introduction of my piece. And I really love experimenting with new sounds. I think as a violinist coming up in a Western classical tradition, mainly before I came to NEC, sometimes I've always wanted to experiment, and I have always used some pedals and stuff with my electric violin, but I sometimes felt like it was quote unquote improper or something. But that's that's just a stereotype. That's not true. You can create beautiful music with so many different ways, and electronics are so cool and something that I'm really excited to explore more now that I've got the opportunity to kind of look at what is possible.
It's amazing when you think about it. I mean, what's your age, if you don't mind me asking?
Sure, just turned 21.
Yeah, I mean, the world is your oyster. Can we still say that phrase? It's like when I think about, you're half my age. All right, Ted, a little over half my age. But the place that you both are coming from, and this is what I remember, Ted, when we talked, is just inconceivable to me. I don't know where that music comes from. Do either of you, and Adrian, if you want to talk, just interrupt me. I don't care. Does your music come from a place? I mean, do you have, I don't know, some people call it source energy, some people call it oversoul, some people call it God, some people say it's just intuition, and some people say, I don't know where it comes from. It's just, it arrives and I make it.
Can I actually, that leads into kind of what I was going to say, actually. I think that music as an experience is innately a spiritual one, because it is created from a human being, and the experience of being a human being is you have a physical body, and you have your consciousness, and then you have a shared consciousness. That's, I guess, what I believe. And there's part of all of us that's one thing that's the same. And I think when we create something, when we express ourselves, since we are from the universe and of the universe, and all we have ever, everything that we are constructed out of is infinite, we create something just as infinite. We create something that is just as spiritual and physical and a conscious thing. It is just as indescribable as we are, and as the world is, and as everything is. So I think just what I was going to say is that the music I want to make is it's just a crazy question. No one's ever asked me that, but I guess what I want to do with my music is kind of create a glass screen between get to a point where I can express myself just as a screen. I can take away all of my ego and all of myself that's in the music, so that the world is just you can just see everything that is yourself within this music, and everyone can see something like else, because there's one part of it that's the same. And then there's all these other parts that are different. Like my ears, like will be different than someone else's ears. Like what do I hear, like what I want to do, and like what I'm thinking about, like my lyrics, like whatever. But I think like music has gotten like what we were saying earlier about like classism and like the idea and like capitalism, like consumerism of music, instead of like having music be an expression, like a group expression that like we come together to like do, because like we as humans like need to express ourselves. Mm-hmm. Like because we don't do that anymore, and it's like consumerist. It makes like music like good or bad, or like, you know, like this is like more progressive, this is like labels, genres, like all of that, you know, like this like colonialist thought of like what music is and like how it is expressed. And like I guess if I could tell anyone like something about music, I guess I just wish like more people were less judgmental about what they listen to, because like there's literally beauty in all of it. Like it's all like infinitely like gorgeous. Like there's an infinite amount of God in it. There's an infinite amount of you in it. And like you just have to like let yourself be with it, you know? And like I just think that like that's something that I think because of like consumerism and like colonialism, like that is created within us, and we have to like unlearn it, just like we have to unlearn like all the other things that we're probably about to talk about right now.
Okay, that's making me cry. And I can't tell you how beautiful that is, because, you know, I was up for a Grammy this year, and how do I say this in a politically correct way? The shit they put you through to get on that list to be up for a Grammy is like, who's the best? Who's the second best? Who's the third best? Why do you think you're the best? You got to populate the internet. You got to populate the DSPs, digital service providers. You have to put it here, right? It was just like, oh my God, so fucking gross that it was just not anything that I have ever experienced in my life. I mean, I would be happy to win a Grammy. Believe me, I'm not stupid, and I think it'd be great for my career, but it's just like, holy crikey. That's not why I wrote that music. I wrote that music because I was on my deathbed, and I was frantically trying to get everything out of me as I died on the operating table and came back to life. And again, Ted can verify this. It's the truth. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, let's see. Is it good enough? Do we like it? You know what I'm talking about, right, man? Adrian, right? It's just like, God help me. Anyway, so that all being said, that we're all one, yet we're all different. Can anybody, does anybody want to talk about their experience with either racism or homophobia or sexism in either in the music world or at the university level without getting yourself in trouble? You know, I don't know if you could get in trouble, but if there's, I guess just don't use names, right, Ted?
I don't know. I don't know what would make someone get in trouble or not get in trouble in this particular conversation. I wouldn't want to. All
right. Well, do whatever you want. All of you, everybody, do whatever they want. Please feel free.
I don't know. Should I start as the teacher? I mean, let me just say that my personal. I'm going to talk about this within the context of the conservatory. So I guess that's your question. I mean, I think that since when I use that word conservatory, I think that immediately brings up a lot of issues.
Right. It does.
Kind of programmed into that word. And I think that if we're going to operate within this framework, and just I'm going to refer to something I heard Fred Moten say in a talk last week, where Fred Moten, I mean, I'm assuming people know who Fred Moten is.
Who I don't even know who that is. Who is that?
Okay, so Fred Moten is a super important, I guess you'd call him. I mean, yeah, I think you'd have to call him a philosopher at this point. I mean, I'm not sure whatever word could encompass everything that he does. He's a poet. He's a professor at NYU in the performance studies department. He's a highly, highly respected essayist, writer, critic, thinker, deeply, deeply embedded in the African-American radical tradition. And that's mostly what he writes about, among many other things. Like he writes about the whole universe of human artwork and thought. And I think a lot of people, myself included, consider him to be like really one of the great, thinkers of our time. And he won the MacArthur grant last year, which was like the most obvious MacArthur Genius Grant recipient of all time, basically. So yeah, I highly recommend. And I think one of the things I most recommend with Moten is, Moten's also a very, very radical political thinker, and that I was initially drawn to Moten because of his thinking about music, because he's written really, really powerfully about Cecil Taylor, for example. He's written some incredible stuff about Cecil Taylor, among many other people. And I got very interested in Moten's poetry in the course of in fact, he's probably the main inspiration that got me to even write poetry in the first place. And then I kind of got involved in, well, not involved in, but I became attuned to his political thought later in that kind of reading of his work. And one of the things he's been talking about a lot over the last year has been the problem of the university and the problem of, an institution that is built on the idea of creating barriers and built on the idea of forcing young people to take on incredible amounts of debt that is, meant to put money in the profits of financial institutions.
Right.
And so by being in the university, you're being part of this really problematic structure that probably is doomed to fail in the not so distant future, because it's just it's a bubble, waiting to happen, waiting to explode. And Moten in a talk that he gave, and Moten is very, very aware of his own complicity in being in the university as a professor at NYU. And so he talks quite a bit about his own experience of being sort of an African-American radical thinker, who's forced to participate in this really deeply awful, damaging system that will break eventually. So I think, what I was going to say in this very roundabout way was, in his talk that he gave last week, he referred to the conservatory as a carceral system, where we're kind of locking music up in these institutions and saying that the stuff that exists outside this institution isn't valid.
Right? Yeah.
We are the conservators of this thing called music, which clearly is a lie, but like many other lies that our society is built on. But I think. One of our jobs in the conservatory now is to, and I think one of the things that NEC has many problems. I'm not gonna say that NEC is an innocent institution by any means, because we have many issues that we're working out, and then the process of working them out has not gone smoothly.
Can we have Ted Reichman down to Ken Chaport's office, please?
Oh, look, we
have a few questions for him. Thank you very much.
Have you seen the memes? There have been memes going around. No, people are very aware. Look, and if I was going to get more specific, jazz education in the conservatory on its own is an incredibly problematic practice when you look at who is on our faculty. And jazz education and on the whole in general. There's been a lot of rightly directed criticism at the broader institution of jazz education, and I think we at NEC, I'm saying we're not innocent by any means. I think we're trying in fairly meaningful ways, and I think the CI department's existence, even though open to critique, of course, I think the CI department, problematic though it may be, and in a problematic institution as it may be, is a sign of the institution's attempt to be open on some level. Successful or not, I'm not sure, but trying, And so I think, I guess I'm not sure what the message of all of this was that I was just trying to say, except that I think being aware of the privilege embedded in a conservatory education and the structure of a conservatory education and the existence of an institution called a conservatory, I think is the first step towards sort of appreciating what we do for its positives and maybe working towards, making the institution more equitable. And maybe it's part of the larger, what I hope will be a larger shift away from this kind of market-based neoliberal education model that forces these debt burdens on students. And I've become incredibly painfully aware of that, and I think that there's a consumerism that becomes part of the educational equation when there's so much money attached to it. And that's something that I think is very deeply
embedded
and painful. You know,
Yeah.
I think for us as educators, especially people who are artists who are in the institution, you know, to educate people in an art form that isn't as Adrian's saying, like nobody's doing what we're doing to get rich, you know, and so to educate people in an art form that's not commercial, and to have them be taking on large amounts of debt while you're doing that. I mean, I think that's something that we as teachers really need to be aware of, and need to make that education as rewarding and as equal as it can possibly be. And so I've been working very hard, sort of within my own work and within my own thinking, to try to accomplish those things.
I think that's one of the. I don't even think that's one of the aspects of this particular. I don't know what you call those pieces that you put up on SoundCloud. Okay, so whatever that was. Okay.
Yeah.
And just Adrian and Cate, just so you know, one of the things that I loved about it, and I might be repeating myself, I'm missing half my brain, everybody be okay if I repeat myself, is it's so welcoming.
Yeah.
All of you. Maybe there was one person, Ted, I told you I didn't think was so welcoming, but maybe it didn't resonate with me. But especially you two, I just felt you were like saying, hey, come on in my house. Check out, listen to my art, listen to my music. I was like, this is really nice.
Yeah. Well, I think,
No,
I think that's the spirit of what I was trying to do. I was trying to sort of, create an open platform for people to kind of.
Congratulations, because I think you did it.
Thank you.
Cate, Adrian, do you agree? I think Ted did a great job, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, it was super amazing. It's definitely been like my most impactful like experience as a class, like in this conservatory thus far, like for sure.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate that.
And after Ted gets fired, we'll send you some money, Ted, or whatever, right? Just kidding. Anyway, anybody else want to speak to the topic at hand here? Or
Yeah, I don't care who goes first. I really don't mind.
I don't care either.
Okay, no, I'll do it.
Okay.
Okay, like the thing that has been like really getting me recently is like, okay, so like I grew up like in New York City. So like I like, and like in Queens, like this is the spot, y'all. Like, I don't know, like I'm not repping Manhattan, bro. Queens is the shit. And like, I just grew up like, I went to like public school and like, and like I just grew up around so many like different types of people and like different like like just like ways of thinking and like ideas, and like I've just been exposed to a lot of like, well, I mean, like, not even like the most, but I definitely feel like I've been exposed to like I'm privileged in the amount of people that I know, like the amount of cultures that I've gotten to like witness and like, go to their people's homes and like just see the way that everyone thinks, the way that everyone like, like the difference in everyone. And like, I think like something that like, that always got to me was like, I kept being like, oh, there's more problems. Like I kept just seeing more issues, like racism is something that is like just the idea of like racism as like, and a thing is like a like incomparable amount of like information on like how everything that we like function in within this society is racist, because like it is like institutionally set up against people of color, like against like disenfranchised people. It's like written into the like the lining of like the way that this works, like it's like this system is built on like the ability for its like racism, like the ability for its sexism, like its ability to like oppress. So it's like so like I guess the thing that I kept getting to was just, I was like, this is the same issue. Like we just kept getting to the same issue of being like, this is like written into everyone's brains, everyone's mind, like everyone, the way that everything works. Like you can change your ideas, you can change your thoughts, and that's really impactful, but it's like, it feels like we're talking about something else. And like something that recently has like, I've been talking to like two of my really, really good friends a lot about this idea of like, I'm gonna get this word wrong, but like decolonialism and like the deconstruction of like colonial thought in the way that it has like, created and like taken over the world that is like existing now, like it's such a like it's such a big part of the world now, is like expansion and like overstepping boundaries and like taking over, like finding resources, like taking more and more, like taking. And I think that like that really is like the biggest, like for me recently, like I've just been thinking about that the most, and I just like can't stop, because like it just always comes back to the fact that it's like the way that we constructed everything is like in an ideology that like is designed to like take from people and give to others. And you don't see, like, now that we've created all these like systems, you don't see like the taking and the giving. Like you don't see, like, when you get a product, like, you know, like, because everything is like so capitalist, like you don't see, like, someone doesn't give you this product and was like, I made this for you. Like, I made this, like, and then they're like, you can ask them questions. You're like, how long did it take? Like, how, like, much of yourself did you give? How many people? Like, that doesn't happen. Like, it just exists, and you like take and you take and you take and you take. And you don't see that, like, it's a person, like, behind everything. There are like people and like people's lives and like people's resources and like other species, the world, Earth, like what it's coming from. And so like, you can't like really make a decision that like, you know, like will mean anything to you, because it's not like, it's not, you're not feeling it. It has become like not, that's like, doesn't matter anymore. And like, that's such a widespread issue of like the idea that you can like go and like take from everywhere and like, you know, like take over people's, like erase people's and like take more and more, because that's it's just never going to stop. Like, it's not like it's going to like get to a place where it just ends. Like, the whole idea is that it just keeps going like this. So like, to like be able to sustain the earth that we live on and like the people that we love and like everything around us, and like acknowledge our privilege and understand that they're like the way the whole system works is oppressing others. Like, we have to understand that really the issue is that like we believe that we are separate from the earth, like we are better, like we are like more, and like we can take more like than like there already is, you know, like. And there's like so many indigenous communities that like have like their whole lives and like traditions shaped around like the way that like the earth and them are connected and like feeling it in every second. And like that's like where my dad is like from Ecuador. He like immigrated here when he was like 17, but like my last name is not Spanish, like it's Incan. And like there's no like my like the language that like my family like spoke when, you know, when it was like not, when it wasn't conquered, was like it's gone, like it doesn't really exist. And like there's no reason that like people's like languages, like just that, you know, it's just like, I don't know, like that's just something that I have been like it's just been like flying around my head, and I just like can't get out of like, I don't see like how is anything else. Like I just see everything in that lens now. But I guess that's the same for everything. You can see everything in every lens, you know? And like there's also intersectionality, like where like colonialism and racism meet, like where colonialism, sexism meet, and like where all these things meet, and those are like individual experiences as well. So it's like, I think that the whole thing is really, really confusing. But it's like important to talk about, because like instead of talking about it, like we're just like, oh, LOL, like let me buy something, like let me like buy a TV show, like let me binge something, like, you know, like it's just not a fact. It's just like the opposite of the facts. Like it's just not.
If we respond to one thing Adrian said just quickly.
Yeah, but I just want to applaud that speech. Thank you. That was really beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. That was one of my ex-boyfriend is Incan. He's Peruvian and stuff, and he has a lot of the same struggles you do, and sometimes hates me because I'm a white male, even though I was his boyfriend for 10 years. But whatever, it is what it is. Anyway, thank you, Adrian. That was really amazing.
So just one quick thing, which is I was watching a really beautiful documentary about Don Cherry, which I recommend everybody, from Swedish television in like 1977 or 78.
It's a great documentary.
Yeah, so at one point in that Cherry is in I think he's in New York, and he says, I'm trying to decide if I can be a musician in the marketplace or if I can be a human being in tune with nature. As those are two different things, you know. And I've been thinking about that statement a lot lately, that he, even as an artist as advanced as Cherry, is sort of like
contemplating.
Yeah, that's a duality. It's not, he doesn't, and Cherry is somebody who kind of, maybe more than most people, was able to do both, was you know.
He was also heavily using then, so sometimes I wonder about his like. No, I wonder. You know, he was using plant medicine. Sometimes I wonder if he wasn't seeing something that nobody else was seeing in a positive way. I don't mean that derogatory. I don't mean addict wise. I just mean maybe he was seeing something that other people couldn't see because he was using plant medicine.
Yeah.
I had a medicine woman on my show, and that's her whole gig. Not opiates, so to speak, but you know, you can see the other dimensions and other worlds and parallel universes, right?
Yeah, it reminds me about like the war of like psychedelics, like what's been going on with like ever since like you know, like when the whole war on drugs happened, like psychedelics as like a part and a piece of like the common consciousness of like a way to of like healing and like understanding other people and like seeing each other like has been like absolutely like crushed by like the weight of like what it means like to have a drug, like what like drugs are, who consumes drugs, and like it's not like, but like, you know, like most of the time people that are talking about these things like haven't even like tried it, you know, they don't know what it's about at all. And so it's like psychedelics have just been so like, you know, just crushed under all that weight. But it's like, it's been like in traditional practices for years that people use psychedelics and like understand and have, there's so many writings and like, there's so much like, you know, positive scientific like information about like how it can help people with PTSD and depression and anxiety. And like, it's just like not, you know, no one knows that at all. Like you have to go out of your way.
Adrian, I worked
drug use.
I worked for an ex-CIA agent, and I worked with an ex-CIA agent, and the whole war on drugs was, they were like, oops, people are starting to see beyond the veil. They can see what's really going on. They can see the lies. I don't know if you guys, if any of you smoke, but when I was watching some of the impeachment hearing, I was having a joint, and I was like, oh my God, these people are fucking liars. I mean, all of them. I mean, all of them.
Right.
You didn't need to be smoking a joint to know that.
I know, but like I'm looking at everybody's
traditional for the inaugurations.
What's that?
I feel like it's a traditional practice for inaugurations. It's like I don't really know if I could do that.
But it's one of those things where, you know, after I had Ted, I don't know if you know this, but after I had the 2 brain surgeries, they say that my pineal gland got decalcified, and so I can see people's auric fields and things like that. And you all have such beautiful energy, and it's one of those things where, Ted, you look a little stressed out. Maybe if I'm going to be critical,
I'm getting worried about we're in a problematic area right now, man. You know,
nah, we're cool. But everybody's energy is just absolutely clean and beautiful, and it's just wonderful to have you all here. And I think in conclusion, because my Zoom will shut off after 2 hours, Cate, if you would like to say something, maybe we should give Cate the floor so she can speak, and then we can whatever afterwards.
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to speak. I mean, everything, Adrian, you said, I that was really beautiful and really well said.
Beautiful, Adrian. Beautiful.
Yeah. Definitely. And one thing that I really resonate with what you said, and something that I've been thinking a lot about too, is just the concept of intersectionality. Outside of music, my main passion is studying the climate crisis and environmental problems. And I've really been thinking a lot about what that means in relation to being an artist and how I can go forward once, as I'm a student, but also once I graduate and I'm no longer a student, how can I combine those 2 passions and really work together? And I think something that's so beautiful about music is just the emotion and the way it can connect people. And I do think some of that is lost in commercialism, which is definitely a huge problem. But, you know, there's so many things we could talk about with all these issues. But I think that just going forward, I think is so important for me as well as other people, just realize, why are we artists and what does that mean? How can we make the world a better place? How can we use our views in music and help people through those? And I think it's really powerful to be an artist, not just, I think the individual gets a lot out of it. I certainly get a lot out of playing with other people and listening to music and watching all types of art too, whether it's visual or listening to different genres of music. I think it's so powerful. But I think it's also so powerful beyond the theory and beyond the, the technicalities of music, just what music can mean, how it can bring people together, and also the importance it has in so many different cultures, and how we really need to try to preserve those both in a quote unquote conservatory setting as well as outside of it. And that's not an easy thing, but it's something I've been thinking a lot about. And I know a lot of people right now are really working hard and doing good work with that, trying to just preserve cultures and preserve music, and through that lead a more sustainable society and sustainable world where we can hopefully still be performing music and not be underwater in a couple hundred years.
It's interesting, Cate. I call him Uncle Peter. He's an intuitive healer, and he's not technically related on my show. And he's 78. And he said that this coronavirus and everything that's been going on in 2020 and into 2021 is they're actually attempting to destroy culture. It's almost like this battle. Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting to me to sit down and listen to this prolific, beautiful music that you both made. And you too, Ted, I love you. Come on. I'm just giving your students some love here. Beautiful. And I was like, okay, that's what I'm talking about. That's how I got, look, you too, just so you know, in 2008, they gave me 8 months to a year to live. Okay. They said, you're done. I'm here over 10 years later because of music. Because I kept writing music, I kept playing music, I kept doing music. My friends made music for me. Ted, I don't know if you did any of those shows, but
working behind the scenes.
What?
I was working behind the scenes.
Okay, thank you, Ted. Thank you, by the way. Thank you. Whatever you were doing. I'm sorry, I was not fully aware. But my point is that music saved my life, and now in this current time, Peter Roth, intuitive healer, amazing man, is just saying they are trying to destroy our culture. And so I think, Cate, what you're saying is really important. I'm not as active as you are in that way. Like I can't do that job. It's just not who I am. I don't have go out there. I can do this. I'm a connector. I'm a manifester. Sorry about that. I can bring you here and you can do what you do, both of you, and Ted as well.
Yeah. And I want to say, sorry to interrupt you, but I want to say something quickly in response to that, which is that I think what we're saying about keeping culture alive and about this idea of connecting people, I think to say something very positive about New England Conservatory is one of the beautiful things about being there as a teacher is the incredibly rich history of all the music that's happened there and all the incredible artists who were there as students and as teachers. And I think for us to be part of that continuity, is a very powerful thing that I think about a lot. And I think about like when we open up, when we figure out a way, whatever the result is, whatever the method is, when we figure out a way to keep it going during this incredibly difficult period, I feel like that's an important gesture towards keeping these things alive. And that's where the conservatory becomes really important because, we never stopped making music over the pandemic and including live music in person. And so when you hear all these articles about like, oh, the clubs are closed and how is music going to survive? Like we're for better or for worse, we're part of that solution to keeping it alive. And so I think about that every day when I'm meeting with students. And I think with all the problems and issues embedded in that, in the institution and in institutionism, the system in general, I think our basic job of keeping music alive through this crisis has been successful. So I think Adrian and Cate have been a huge part of that. And I'm super happy, Andrew, that you got something out of our work because I think there was no guarantee that any of it was going to happen. So I'm very thankful that it connected with you.
I see people are chatting. I can't read the chat without my glasses. So if there's anything important, just go ahead and tell me, unless you're doing like behind the scenes. But standing ovation for both of you, Cate and Adrian. Absolutely amazing. And you don't have to like my music. You don't even have to know it. But I was so moved. And I listened on speakers. I listened on my good headphones. I listened on my earbuds because, I'm like kind of a nerd. And it was just so good in every context. And now Ted introduced me to you both, and I'm like, okay, they're as beautiful as their music. And going forward, I really hope that you continue. I don't know, what do we say these days? Like, fight the good fight, man. I mean, I don't know what's the phrase, just thank you and keep creating, because this man here, Andrew D'Angelo, has had a really tough time keeping up with it during this whole pandemic over the last, in 2020 was just not a great year for me. And I've had my own personal problems, and I won't burden you with them, but it was just so inspiring. I pulled out my saxophone. I'm playing to your songs. I'm like, oh my God, this needs a sax solo over it, man. And I just really, really want to like drive that home, that I am so happy there's people out there like Ted, and hopefully Ted is inspiring you. And it's not just of your own volition, that that Ted is basically serving you the food or the ingredients, and you're creating. And thank you, Ted, and
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Cate.
Thank you so much for having us.
It's so inspiring to talk with you. So thank you.
Oh, me? I ain't doing nothing, man. I like looking at my saxophone. It's like, are you gonna play me already or what?
That's good. That's good. If you end the conversation with that energy, then that's good.
Ted, the consummate pro. All right. This is going to sound weird, but I love you all. I really do. Thank you very much. Have a beautiful evening, and please stay in touch. And if you make more stuff, music or whatever, please make sure that it comes my way, and I'll send it out to the world as much as I can.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Andrew. It's really an honor.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye, everybody.
It's great being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Love you.
Love you too. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Constant Constance. Tune in every week for new conversations. And if you want even more, check out Andrew's Patreon for more exclusive content and additional conversations. Hosted and produced by Andrew D'Angelo. Edited and mixed by Lucy Little. Original music by Andrew D'Angelo and Maximilian Moore D'Angelo. Intro is Henrietta Weeks. Thanks so much. See you next time.
You fucking rocked it. Like, she doesn't know she says podcast, right? Like, she doesn't even